Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, Instagram, and MeWe. And of course, be sure to visit mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
I don't want to be like them. Locked in a prison that they forgot that they're in.
What prison?
The F's.
I am sensing a lack of focus.
You didn't keep in touch with Cindy at all after graduation?
She hasn't even crossed my mind in 15 years.
I do remember Cindy Williams. She just vanished. That was the time when that awful drug went round the school.
Can't shake the feeling.
Something bad happened to her.
One night, we were all in Merc. What does it do to you? We gotta go back. We gotta try to remember what happened to her that night. This is it. This is where it happened. Let's leave. Let's just go.
I'm supposed to be here.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 350. Releasing in the US on June 4 in select theaters and video on demand is Flashback, a mind-bending mystery thriller that stars Dylan O'Brien as Fred, a young man whose life is thrown into disarray when he is plagued with horrific visions of a girl who vanished in high school. Also starring Maika, Monroe, and Emery Cohen, Flashback is an original and uncompromising work that is as haunting as it is heartbreaking. And I'm happy to say joining me now on the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is a writer and director of Flashback, Christopher MacBride. Christopher, I thank you very much for joining me today.
Hi, Matt. It's my pleasure. Happy to be here.
You know, it's really interesting. I've been doing a bit of research on yourself and on this movie as well. This screenplay for Flashback, this was actually one of the first screenplays you ever wrote. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, I wrote this, I'm going to say maybe even 15 years ago. Yeah, it was one of the very first scripts I ever wrote. I was not working as a filmmaker. I had made a couple short films. It was when I was still learning how to do everything, basically. And but it was the first script I wrote that I was proud of, and it was the first one that I started showing to people. And I always thought it was too weird to get made and too abstract, and it didn't fit into any genre cleanly. And so it sort of sat around while I did another film and developed a whole bunch of other ones. And just a couple of years ago, I sort of got up the courage to show it to more people, and was very surprised when people started responding to it and enjoying it.
It's an interesting movie in that it has a lot of different elements to it. It delves into time, memory, venturing into adulthood. I'm curious, though, what was the initial idea that really sparked the creation of this story?
Yeah, it's funny because it was so long ago. It's sometimes hard to track down the exact genesis moment. I know that when I was, again, years ago, when I was first learning how to write, the very first script I ever wrote, which you can't even really call a script, was this crazy big, like 300-page manifesto. Is basically like every idea I had for a movie I put into this one script, and then that I eventually realized that was the work of a madman, and it spiraled off. The ideas in it spiraled off into their own individual scripts, and one of those scripts became Flashback. And I think at the heart of it, it was really it was my desire to explore a philosophical question, which is, in many ways the oldest philosophical question, which is just, is free will a real thing? And does free will exist? And does any choice we make actually come from us being truly free? Or, is our very decision-making process so tainted with the influence of external forces that we can never actually make a choice ourselves? And so it's this really sort of, it's a philosophical question that I then sort of had to figure out how to translate into a story and into a narrative with characters and make it interesting and exciting and stuff. And but I think that was sort of the genesis of it, was just that wanting to explore that idea, and then that eventually became exploring this character who on the surface, Fred Fitzell has a normal life and everything's fine, but he feels that he's not living the life he's supposed to be living. He feels that there was another path he was supposed to take and sort of just missed. And then him kind of going backwards and sort of trying to figure out where that fork in the road was and see if he can still go back.
Film is such a great cast. I mentioned in my intro there, Dylan O'Brien stars in the movie. I think it's the best performance he's put the screen on to date so far. How did he get involved in the movie, and what was it like directing him in this film?
Yeah, we cast him very early. He was one of the first people we went to. He responded immediately to the script. He got it. He totally understood it. And that's a big thing, like a lot of people could read the script for this film and be like, what on earth is this? This is crazy. But he completely got it. He got the character, and we were able to talk about it, and I could tell he totally got it. And I knew Dylan through the Maze Runner movies, and once I knew he was interested, I devoured everything I could get my hands on that he was in. I could tell he was a good actor, and I could tell that he had never done a movie like this. I mean, I don't know if anyone's done a movie exactly like this, but I had a really good sense that he was going to be great in it. But of course, I wasn't sure. And then when we started shooting the very first day, the very first scene, I could tell he was going to knock it out of the park. Like he just became Fred, and it's nice of you to say that you think it's his best performance. I agree. I think he's incredible in it. And not only is he he's able to go to all these different crazy emotional places in the film, but he's able to do it in different timelines. So when he's younger, when he's older, and because the narrative is somewhat abstract, and he's in these very strange situations, his performance kind of always grounds it and grounds the audience. And so the audience is experiencing these very strange, surreal things through Dylan's eyes. And because he's so good and he's relatable and he's just, you're able to feel what he's feeling, he really saves the film and guides the audience through it. And yeah, I've said it before, we would have been screwed 100 times if it weren't for Dylan. He saved this film with how good he was. And not only is he great, but he's been on sets his whole life. So he really knows the technical side of filmmaking. His father, worked in films, and I think he was a camera person or something like that. And so he's been around it his whole life. So he could reach these really interesting emotional places, but then simultaneously understand that the light from our lights wasn't hitting his eyes the right way, and naturally tilt his head so that the light would hit his eye without me or the DP even telling him to do that. He had such an understanding of the technical side of things, as well as, really knocking out of the park performance wise. So yeah, I love him. I think he's great. He's a great person. And it was really like a dream, collaboration.
This is an independent production we're talking about here with Flashback. Once you get a name like a Dylan O'Brien or a Maika Monroe attached to your movie, what does that do to the making of that film? Is it all of a sudden this struggling ship is just turned into like a rocket ship and off it goes with names attached like that to it?
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. I mean, it becomes real at that point, there's so many films, in development, whether in Hollywood or independent or somewhere in the middle. And, even big films that are set up at, I have a whole bunch of films that are in development at studios, big Hollywood studios and things. And, they don't really become real until you get an actor attached. And then everyone's like, oh, this is a movie that's going to probably get made. So, yeah. So this, the second, Dylan liked the film and got involved. Yeah. It goes from being this strange little indie that's, how are we going to get funding for that? To, oh, this is real, and people are also, it's not only just because actors mean box office and actors, get things greenlit. It's also because oftentimes there's so many people in the film industry who don't want to be the first person to admit they either like or dislike something. They always sort of want to play it safe. And as soon as an actor usually says, this is good, I like this, and puts their sort of stamp, their opinion on it, then everyone else goes, oh yeah, it is good. It is good. It is good. They're always waiting for that first other person. Because of course the writer and the filmmaker thinks it's good. But it's that one big outside source, sort of validating it, that then gets everyone else to jump on. So you put it perfectly, and way less long-winded than I just did. But yeah, it turns into a rocket ship, and it becomes real as soon as Dylan gets involved.
You mentioned about the nature of free will in regards to a concept that really drew you to writing on the story. Something that I took from the film was the nature of time, especially in regards to the character of Fred. I think, I'm pretty sure in the movie he's turning 30. It's his transition from his 20s into his new era of adulthood. He's engaged, he's got a new apartment, he's got a new job. But then he starts looking back. Things are happening. I don't want to get too much into that because it's going to spoiler territory. And it's something that I can really, really kind of attach myself to. I'm turning 40 next month. So I'm already through my 30s. So I'm going through another kind of transition of adulthood. You yourself, Christopher, when you were writing this script, maybe even when you were making it, did you kind of look at that kind of concept of time? And as we get older, how we tend to look back and we try to analyze things a little more, maybe because we can't get that time back, we can't change things. Is that something that really kind of drew you as well when making a movie, watching a movie? Is that something that people have even talked to you about in regards to the film?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, I know I'm constantly, and I think most people do this, you're constantly, especially as you get older, you sort of being amazed at how old you are and sort of like, I can't believe I'm now this age, and I can't believe, in theory, this much of my life has gone past, and, your own mortality starts becoming less of an abstract thought and more concrete and more real as a thing that's approaching. And so, and then that causes you to re-examine everything you're doing, and are you making the most of your time? And just, how, and of course, how we perceive time changes throughout our lives. And when you're young, a summer is infinite, but, when you're older, a summer whips by in 2 seconds. And so it's sort of speeding up as it goes along. And those are definitely things I think about, and those emotions of sort of nostalgia and, wondering, what could have been, and what would you make different choices if you went back? I think there's a bit of wish fulfillment in there. Because I think we all experience that to some degree. And in terms of like perceiving time, that's sort of another thing at the heart of the story, which is the idea that perceiving time in a linear fashion and perceiving it as something that necessarily only moves forward and goes A to B to C, that's something that we have to learn, and whether it's Stephen Hawking or whatever, the whole concept of relativity, and, time is something that can be bent and is malleable, and it depends on how we perceive it. It's not just a concrete thing that only necessarily flows or operates in one way. And so my kind of idea at the core of the story was, that perception of time as a linear phenomenon is something that we have to be taught. It's something that we learn when we're very young, is how to sort of perceive consequence. And through perceiving consequence, we learn future and past. And it just becomes ingrained in us. And it's the only way we can perceive time our entire lives. But, what if there was a drug? What if there was something that could sort of cleanse that out of you, could sort of take that education away from you? And then how would you perceive time then if your sort of training on how to perceive time as linear, was stripped from you? So yeah, that's sort of at the heart of the story. And I think it's a fascinating, terrifying thing that all human beings are always grappling with, is just, God, I'm old.
I feel that as well. It's really interesting in regards to time. The last movie that you released was a conspiracy. I think that was back in 2013. Just the nature of watching films, how much it's changed since then to now. And I think releasing this movie now in 2021 is really a positive thing, just in the way that people watch films, especially in the streaming generation, because this is a movie in Flashback that demands repeated viewings. I think this is a kind of film that people are going to watch. Not to say they're not going to watch in theaters because it looks terrific and it's edited great and the music's great and everything's cool, but watching it, especially on like at home, either streaming or on DVD or Blu-ray, I think that's going to have a lot of repeated viewings. Are you prepared for a lot of people to watch this film over and over and over? Are you prepared kind of like with the conspiracy of people like doing their own analysis of their own kind of theories, diving into the rabbit hole that this film will really kind of bring out in a lot of people?
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that. I had a joke with my editor on the film. He would always tell me, Chris, you're way too concerned with the fifth time viewer of this film. You have to think more about the first time viewer. And because I would always, as I was crafting it, sort of imagine, the people that liked it and would watch it multiple times and wanting to sort of reward those people who were, digging deeper and sort of putting Easter eggs throughout it. And, those are the kind of movies I love, that where you get more and more and more as you watch it. And I think part of the way you encourage people to watch a film more than once, like some people just won't like it and they never will. But for people that do like it, we all like lots of movies, but some of them, even though we like them, we never go back and watch them again. But some of them we go back over and over and watch them. And I think part of the way we encourage people to do that is by leaving a degree of ambiguity in the narrative. Mm-hmm. If something, as an example, like The Sixth Sense, as soon as spoiler for anyone who's still living in 1999, but as soon as that Bruce Willis is a ghost at the end, the movie is done. It's over. The mystery is solved completely. And you could go, of course, watch it again to see, oh yeah, I see he was a ghost, but there's no more mystery to the movie. Whereas a film that doesn't give you all the answers at the end, a film that like deliberately leaves out a puzzle piece or two, that film lives forever in a way in your imagination because you're never given the exact answer to what happened.
Yeah.
And so it just gives it a more of a life. And then you're always wanting to sort of go back and revisit it. And I'm sure studio executives wanted Stanley Kubrick to explain the hell out of the end of 2001 rather than have this like poetic abstract ending, with the man in the bed and all that. But like that film lives forever because it's not wrapped up in a bow and explained perfectly at the end. And the audience has to sort of use their own experience and their own imagination to sort of fill in the end. So like that's something I was conscious of with this film. It wouldn't have made sense if everything got tied up in a bow at the end and like this, let me just run down exactly what just happened. And this is why this happened. It's, that would have just been the wrong kind of ending. And so it's deliberately left a little bit open-ended so that it like hopefully like rewards people that keep going back and back to see it.
I love watching films over and over as well, and I'm pretty sure this one's going to be one of mine repeat viewings. And to me, it's kind of like a great prog rock record. You know the main riff, but when you listen to them over and over, there's a new lick there, there's a new something else happening that you kind of haven't picked up from the time before, and it creates a new picture in your mind. And I think I really enjoy art like that, and especially what Flashback has as well. I know that you've been working tirelessly over the years on projects that have not seen the light of day. To have Flashback out there now, releasing next week for people to watch, what's that feeling like to have a product out there to talk about for people to see, considering it's been such a long time since The Conspiracy came out as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I've said this before, but it's been a long labor for this film. So I'm very happy to have the baby born and get out of this hospital for sure. People ask, like, why did you wait so long between your first and second film? And, it's not a conscious thing. It's not something like, I'm going to wait 8 years. It's, you don't always have control over these things. And I, as I said, I think, I have a whole bunch of films in the studio system and, these things are always getting either closer or further away from being made. And that was part of the reason I dusted off this script was because after my first film, I suddenly got some success in Hollywood and I got a, agent and a manager and a lawyer and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm start getting paid to write scripts for studios and everything's great, but the movies are not actually getting made. And, you can live a comfortable life just having films in development in Hollywood, but you're not making movies, and that's what it's all about. So that was part of the reason I made this film was because I got so sick of endlessly waiting for, the bigger studio things to get made. And I was like, I need to make movies. I got to go make this other film. So I'm super glad I did. Of course, then we got hit with the pandemic right before we finished, which threw everything into another loop. But yeah, I'm incredibly, relieved and happy that it's, it's finally approaching its moment of birth, so to speak. And I can't wait to hear what people think about it. So many people it's a movie that I think is going to garner a lot of interesting responses. So it's going to be fascinating to see.
So for everyone listening across the US, June 4, select theaters and video on demand, Flashback releases. Also coming out later on June 8 on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital as well. I highly recommend this movie. It's one of my favorite films I've seen so far this year. And I can't wait to see it again. And Christopher MacBride, I thank you very much for your time today. And again, congratulations with the movie. It's a great film, and you did a great job here.
Thank you so much, Matt. A real pleasure talking to you. Thanks, man.